What about the idea of cost? And I know companies really are concerned with that, but the problem is it's very hard to throw out a dollar figure because it's sort of like it could cost several thousand or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. How can companies be prepared for cost? And as a separate question, take your pick which one you want to answer. Is it a good idea for a company to see an app that they like and emulate it and say how much would it cost to build that particular app, so they have a really specific idea? So, but the general question is cost. Alex, what's your sense? What do you tell people about cost?
Sure. I mean, I think there's no kind of rules of thumb. It absolutely depends on your specific situation. I think the one thing is the more information you can have on what you're trying to build, the better someone's going to be able to estimate your costs. So, if you have, there's apps that you can build prototypes in, such as Envision app and different ones like that, where you can kind of come up with a pretty good feel for what your app's going to look like, and then kind of try to approach someone for them to kind of be able to estimate that as well. I think the other thing I mentioned is basically depends on the overhead and what your kind of team structure is. Are you going to be just hiring a single developer, or are you hiring a whole team? And depending on that, the cost is going to be definitely different as well. One other factor is the platform. I mean, let's say for example you're going to be targeting iOS, but also doing Android. I mean, that's almost going to double your costs because you're not going to be able to share much of the mobile code. The back end you'll be able to share, but the mobile code you won't. So it just depends. I mean, smaller apps, anything from $20,000 to $40,000 could get you started, but it can go up to hundreds of thousands to millions. So it's very hard to kind of come up with an example. I would say, I mean, looking at other apps is a good idea, just to be able to kind of get ideas on what the app should look like and the functionality, and you kind of get ideas they can kind of apply to your own specific situation, and that's definitely not a bad way to go.
Rupert, what do you tell people about cost? Is there someone to give a ballpark figure?
Well, I think we should start with just in general software estimation, whether it's for a mobile app or for any other application. Estimation is part art and part science. The art part of it is based on all of the unknowns with any kind of platform. So you're dealing with a new version of iOS, you're dealing with a new language, you're dealing with a new device, you're dealing with any things that are sort of unexplored and new. And that part is really hard to estimate because unless you've done some prototyping or done some work with it, you kind of don't know what you're getting into. So let's leave the art part aside and focus kind of on the science side. So on the science side, the first question is, do you have a clear idea of what your requirements are? If you do, now you have a shot at getting a reasonable estimate. If you don't, it's sort of a guessing game. One way of guessing is by analogy. Certainly, is there another application that's 90%, 99% of what we want? You could use that as an analogy, but you would still need to know how much it costs to have that other app built in order to be even able to compare. Most of the time, I find that people don't have a clear set of requirements. It's just the nature of doing new things, and in that, Agile is sort of a way to deal with that. You say, we'll chunk this up into X week iterations, and this is going to be the cost per iteration, and this will be the scope per iteration. So you're essentially spreading your risk out over an extended period of time. I would definitely avoid anybody who tries to give you a low-ball fixed cost estimate for what is obviously, it's sort of like, is this deal too good to be true? If it is, it probably is too good to be true.
Well,
So,
yeah, it gets back to what Tim was saying in terms of you build it, but of course that's actually only step one. Building the entire thing and getting it live in the field is only step one. Then it becomes updating it and what the costs are for that. So it's a whole other question.
yeah, and along with cost, you've got quality and you've got timeline, right? So you may get an app, it just may not be very good, or it may not come out in the timeline that you expected. And as Alex pointed out, are there things outside of the application that they have forgotten to estimate? Many times for a mobile application, people forget the actual back end or the web services that have to be built in order to support that mobile application, and they kind of assume that the app developer for the mobile app is going to build those. So if you need to build a back end that can pull in feeds, content from other places, and clean them up and display them and capture user input and store it and maybe even display it on the website, that's almost like building a second app, except it's running on the website. So it's very important for whoever looks at your project to kind of systematically break it down and kind of think through how they're estimating it and have them explain to you how they came up with their estimate, what they're basing that on, and what are some of the things that they think are gotchas or areas that they can't estimate because they don't have enough information.
Tim, what do you tell people about cost, and is there a way for you to throw out, not necessarily your own shop, but you say, I've seen this kind of an app done for this amount, or this kind of an app done for this amount. It's a Cadillac, it's a Toyota.
That's the only part that works. It's a loose ballpark. Even if they come to me with those specs, their specs are wrong. The trick about building software is 50% of the way through, you actually know what you're trying to build, unless you're actually trying to clone something. And that's a certainly different case. Like we're not the sort of developer to go to build an exact clone. You're exploring what the product is, and so it's very challenging to estimate, which is why you can get a rough ballpark of, hey, how much would it cost to build an app like this or of this scale? And even though they're like, oh, it's e-commerce, it will look like an e-commerce one, they're really just big buckets of, are you trying to do an MVP? Are you trying to do a first version that has real users? Are you trying to do the full version that scales up a little more? Like it's a spectrum around how much money you have and time and the features. And even those are kind of loosey-goosey because we've worked with people with similar scope projects where we estimated 40K and got it done in 22K for an MVP.
Yeah, okay.
And we've seen people where we tell them, hey, 50 is going to get you there, and that's not even beginning to start. A lot of it is the discipline. When you say MVP, it's a very complicated word. How it breaks down.
Minimally viable product.
Yeah.
There's different things to different people.
A lot of my job is to tell product people, you can't have all that, you can't have all that. And a lot of the discipline of how willing someone is to not be attached to their idea, but to solving the problem and refine it really affects that scope.
Right.
So what I'll end up doing is giving you large ballparks of this would be about what you would get in that. And then over time, we refine what features are in or out. I say trying to hit a exact price goal per feature is like trying to dock with the space station by turning on off all your steering thrusters and hitting go. You're like, we're going to get to 150 and we're going to have this feature set, and you're going to be wrong. 60 to 80% of software projects fail, and part of why Agile helped that was it said, hey, rather than defining success as this exact spec sheet on this exact budget, let's get into it and collaboratively figure out how long it'll take.
Right.
If you're working with people that know what they're doing, they'll deliver enough projects that they can tell you, we can deliver a working version of this with some of these features for this sort of range. Which exact features are in, we should actually not turn now anyways,
right.
Because it's much different once you have it in your hands and you're having your users' hands and they're using it. And if this feature that takes 30% of the budget isn't the one that anyone cares about, why would I want to spend the time building it?
Right.
Drive it from a user study. Drive everything from real results. Drive it from a user study. Determine this is the feature we should spend our time on. So anything other than time and materials, agile-based work for consulting, I think is doing a disservice to the developer and the client, actually.